All right, guys, so welcome back. This week we're going to just dive right back into football with it coming up very, very shortly. Preseason start is going to start up here before we know it. Off-season stuff for NFL teams is starting up, with summer camp and all that other stuff. So let's just dive into football. I know last week we already kind of dipped our toes a little bit in the water with Will. We kind of talked about, Browns and, of course, Cowboys, since he is a Cowboys fan. Ohio State stuff, which we might get to next week. Brendan Sorsby, because at the time we all assumed that Sorsby was going to be, going into the supplemental draft. Of course, he is no longer going into the supplemental draft, and I just feel like every time I try and make a video on this, I just keep getting outdated. Like, information just keeps coming out, and new stuff keeps, being given to the public basically on that story. It just feels like no matter what I do with the story, it's not going to come to an end. At the moment of this recording, Sorsby, I think, is appealing this decision, and he's saying how it is against the law and stuff like that. So we'll see. But all he's really doing is digging a deeper hole for himself. The NFL said that he basically was not, or did not seem like he was ready to take accountability for his actions that he did over the course of his college career, whether he was playing or not playing, football. And if that's the case, then that's a shame on Brendan Sorsby. I don't think Texas Tech will take him back. I feel like all the bad public opinion on Texas Tech, it would just be pointless for Texas Tech to basically say see ya to Brendan Sorsby after Sorsby was just fighting all of this and wanting to come back and play for Texas Tech. Texas Tech said no thank you, go to the draft and we'll figure it out. And now that Sorsby doesn't have that option, it would kind of feel dumb if you're Texas Tech to kind of, say welcome back and you can be our starting quarterback and kind of restart this drama all over again. But it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibilities. I would not be surprised if Texas Tech comes out and says that Brendan Sorsby hasn't been invited back into the program and that he is able to finish out his career, in Texas Tech. And while I really hope that's not the case, and that's probably one of the worst case scenarios right now, I am expecting at least some type of team. It might not even be Power 4 or even Division 1, honestly. But I am expecting Sorsby to play somewhere this upcoming college football season. I just don't really know where. So if you were looking for a little update on that, and my opinion on that, there that is. We're just going to get into Browns stuff for the rest of this video. And what we're going to do today is not do a full-on prediction. I'm going to save my predictions for right when the preseason is starting up, a few weeks, maybe even during the preseason, and kind of get a grasp on, everything that's going on. Maybe there's a few guys that we're not expecting anything from to kind of make themselves known on this team throughout like summer mini camp. Unlikely, but it's not, it's not the craziest thing that's happened, or some people that we're expecting a lot from kind of disappoints, and we're starting to kind of see that. So you never know right now. Of course, we're still in the midst of a quarterback battle between Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson. We'll get into what I think is going to happen. Maybe we'll see. It's still very much up in the air, and I don't think anyone can definitively say that they know who the starting quarterback is, or know who the starting quarterback is going to be in week 1. Preseason is different, but week 1 I'm talking about is, what we're going to do. So we're going to take a look at the Browns schedules. I'm not going to go and give a game-by-game prediction yet. That will be in a future video. But I am going to look at the schedule and kind of give an early preview. Let's just talk about what the Browns did last season. So, of course, with the Cincinnati Bengals game in week 1, that was a bit of a disappointment. Schmidt missed a game-winning field goal and an extra point. The Browns end up losing 17-16 in Cleveland in week 1. Quinshon Judkins was not back yet. This was Joe Flacco's first game back as a Cleveland Brown, which feels like it was so long ago. it feels like that was like 2 or 3 years ago at this point, and it was only week 1 of last year. It just feels like this Browns team is an entirely new team, and it is obviously new coaching staff, completely new core. This is just a new era of Browns football that we're going to be going into in this coming year, but it just feels like it's been so long that we have, been between now and week 1 against Cincinnati. So the Browns unfortunately lose there. They get demolished on my birthday, 41-17 in Baltimore against the Ravens, and that was the kind of game where we were looking at Joe Flacco like, all right, I think we need to wrap this up. The Packers, we escape with the miracle win, the last second field goal. Schmidt gets his redemption from week 1. We defeat the Packers. That was, before Micah Parsons got injured, and we were looking at, especially me, if you go look at my post-game reactions of this, and even in I'm probably more halftime because I think my post-game reactions was really, really short, but especially halftime, I was telling everybody that I think this Packers team is a Super Bowl contender, and if I had to pick right now, that they would probably be my pick to win the Super Bowl. And then the Packers got, hit with a bunch of injuries and really, really bad times. Micah Parsons, of course, and that defense kind of fell apart. Jordan Love kind of showed his inexperience a little bit there, and they ended up losing to the Bears in, I believe, back-to-back weeks. For sure, the last game of the season, and then in the playoffs in Chicago both times. And blowing a lead in the playoffs and losing to their arch rivals in the Chicago Bears in the playoffs. And then we go to Detroit and kind of get manhandled there. I've said this multiple times. Detroit was not the team that everyone was kind of, propping them up to be. This was not a team where, you looked at and it struck fear into your heart like it has been the past, give or take 2 seasons. They were still a really, really good team, but you can kind of tell that they kind of lost that, that aura, if you will, after that Commanders game in the playoffs a few years ago. And I just feel like the farther we get from that year, when they made it to the NFC Championship and blew it against the 49ers, and then they lost to the Washington Commanders while having the 1 seed, the further away we get from those years, the more we're going to look back on those and be like, that was the Detroit Lions opportunity. So, by no means is their window completely shut, but it's closing, and it's probably closing a little bit faster than Lions fans kind of wanted to admit. So, I even said that in my post-game reactions. I'm like, this team is not the Lions of a few years ago and even the year before, but this was still a really good team, and the Browns kind of showed that there were levels to this game. And they gotta get dominated. Aiden Hutchinson, I think, actually had a strip sack in the 4th quarter, which was an extra cherry on top. If you know me, you know I do not like Aiden Hutchinson. One of the more disliked people, him and J.J. McCarthy, both very disliked from, of course, an Ohio State fan like me, but the way that they have kind of portrayed themselves. And for Michigan fans, I'm sure that is why he is loved so much, especially in Detroit, Aiden Hutchinson especially. But as an Ohio State fan looking at an arch rival, I just don't like Aiden Hutchinson. Nothing against him as a person, as a player, and, as a college player and as an NFL player, I just don't like him. Probably one of my least favorite players in the NFL. No disrespect to him as a person, obviously. But as a player, I don't like him. I don't like the team that he went to in college. I don't like the states that he is from. That just is what it is. And then the Vikings in London, that was a game that, probably should have won. I believe that might have been Dylan Gabriel's first start. No, it wasn't. No, I think that was Flacco's last start, I believe. Let me actually look at that really quickly since I have it right here. Oh, no, it was... I believe it was Dylan Gabriel's first start, just by looking at some of the stat leaders and stuff like that. So it was the London game, was Dylan Gabriel's first start, which still feels like an eternity ago. And he doesn't really have a future on this team, honestly. I think his future is more in the UFL a little bit. And it's unfortunate to see, but I just don't think he has the talent to be an NFL quarterback, and he got away with being a halfway decent athlete in college. It's just a whole different ball game in the NFL, and he doesn't have the physical traits. His height, he's very, very short. He doesn't have the arm talent. It's just not going to work out here, and the Browns have kind of already figured that. I would not be surprised if he gets traded here. Whether that's during the preseason, before the preseason, or even he is a preseason cut. I just don't see a future for Dillon Gabriel on this team, unfortunately. But that was his first start. The Vikings ended up, I think, scoring a touchdown in the last few minutes of the fourth quarter. They escape with the win in London. And then you go and play the Steelers in Pittsburgh, and you get manhandled. But it was not a very surprising, game. The Browns have not won a regular season game in Pittsburgh since I have been born, and I am going on 21 here in a little bit. So that goes to show how bad the Browns are, no matter how good the team is, whether that is the 2020 year. Of course, we got the win back in Pittsburgh in the playoffs, but, in the regular season, we got manhandled in Pittsburgh. 21 was not great, I think I remember. 23, which was the Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson did play in that game, but that was the game that Nick Chubb unfortunately did get injured. Steelers escape with a win there, and it just feels like, and of course the Browns made the playoffs that year as well, and looked like to be threats, and that was going to be, unfortunately, the height of their window, I guess you could say, with that core. Either that or 2020. That's just what it was, Steelers escape with the win. Nick Chubb gets hurt, and unfortunately that was probably the end of his not probably, but was the end of his peak. And I would love to see Nick Chubb come back as a Cleveland Brown for maybe 1 to 2 years on a minimum deal. I know he is still a free agent right now, but if Andrew Berry is somehow listening to this video, please go sign Nick Chubb. It would just be a really good morale boost to not only the players, to give, guys like Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson, a veteran leader, that knows what it's like to be a Cleveland Brown and knows what it takes to be loved by these Cleveland Brown fans. You know what I mean? So I feel like it would be a good boost to the fans. Obviously, we're not expecting to be Super Bowl contenders this year. We're not even really expecting to be playoff contenders this year. So I just think it would be a really good thing for the fans just to kind of give Nick Chubb, if this is going to be his last year, his kind of last dance as a Cleveland Brown. Give him the option to retire as a Cleveland Brown. Bring him back on a minimum deal. You don't got to play him really that often. And it also gives a little bit of a break to Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson, who kind of dealt with a little bit of injury in their rookie year, which can also take some weight off of their shoulders if Nick Chubb is in the lineup. Obviously, he's not going to be the Nick Chubb that we have come to expect in a Cleveland Browns uniform, but it's still Nick Chubb, and he still has the instincts, and he can only teach. You know what I mean? He's not going to be these type of Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers guys. I know those are quarterbacks, but he's not going to be one of those guys that's going to keep their walls up. You know what I mean? So I think there's no downside to signing Nick Chubb, and I think if Andrew Berry or Jimmy Haslam or even Todd Monken understands and kind of has their finger on the pulse of this Browns fan base, I think that would be a really good idea. But anyways, Steelers, Browns go get, outclassed in Pittsburgh. And then you basically do the exact same thing to the Miami Dolphins at home and get your, second win on the year? And it was just kind of like a game where it was like, man, it could be bad, but at least we're not the Miami Dolphins. And of course, the Miami Dolphins actually ended up going on a run a little bit there. But this was right around the same time where they had their locker room drama with Tyreek Hill. And I believe he just got injured a game or two before the Browns game here, unfortunately for him. But this was right at the peak of that. Mike McDaniel was kind of already being ousted as the Miami Dolphins head coach, and they were going through their roughest patch of the year. Browns catch them at home, which is, typically when that environment gets going, it's a really, really raucous environment and a tough environment to play in. and with a defense that is probably, and I will stand by this, if the Browns had at least an average offense last year, the Browns defense would have been the best defense in the NFL, but it was because the Browns offense was so bad and the worst in the NFL by a pretty good margin. The Browns defense got worn out and their stats didn't look better as, say a Houston did. And I can go on and on about that stuff, but that's just my opinion on it. And then you go and play the Patriots. Of course, the Patriots just made the Super Bowl, and you lose, and you put up a pretty good fight against New England. You only lose 32-13, so it's not as bad as you would expect, but you're obviously not going to get a win against a Super Bowl team that they made the Super Bowl, and you guys didn't even make the playoffs, and you had a high pick in the draft. So it is what it is. Then you lose probably the most frustrating game of the year to the Jets in New York. It kind of felt like this was the game where, you felt the writing on the wall for Dillon Gabriel. Only had 116 yards. And also, Justin Fields threw the ball. I'm looking at the stats here. 11 times he threw the ball for 54 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And you still lost 27-20. It's not great. So that's just bad all around. Probably one of your more embarrassing losses of the year, and it was to the Jets. Then you go home and you play the Ravens, and you put up a really, really good fight. I believe this was a primetime game as well. And you put up a really good fight. I believe the defense had 2 pick sixes in this game, or at least 2 defensive touchdowns in this game. I believe. Maybe not. Because you only scored 16 points. I know for sure they had 1. I'm not positive if they had 2 or not. So that might be on me, but I'm just remembering it wrong. But the defense had a really, really good showing in this game. You just came up short. You ran out of gas in that first half. And this was Shedeur Sanders' first start of the year, if I remember correctly. And he showed some promise, only losing 23-16. Yes, you were at home. Yes, you were kind of in a primetime environment and against a division rival. But he showed some promise, and that's all you really asked for in his first start. Made, of course, mistakes that rookies are going to make. Had, I believe, an interception to end the game. You knew the arm talent wasn't where you liked it to be, or arm strength, you know what I mean? So, is what it is. Then you go on the road and you play the Raiders, and you beat them by 14, 24-10. It was another one of those games we could be this bad, but at least we're not the Raiders. The Raiders, of course, were basically trying to lose. I think Max Crosby was basically deactivated for the rest of the NFL season by this point, and they were going for Fernando Mendoza, which I really wanted the Browns to go for. I said it at the end of the Penn State-Indiana game, where Penn State had one of their better games of the year and a really disappointing season right after they fired James Franklin. Fernando Mendoza goes into Happy Valley, and Penn State puts on one of their better performances of the year. They almost beat eventual national champions Indiana, and the Indiana escapes on a last-second touchdown. And after that game, I put a video out. You can still go watch it. I said that the Browns should be targeting Fernando Mendoza as their quarterback for the future. Did not happen. Browns were just a little bit better than the Las Vegas Raiders. They beat them 24-14 in Vegas. And then you come home, and I was actually at this game. This was the weekend of the Ohio State-Michigan game. If anyone does not remember, go watch that video. I'm going to continue to plug it. Go watch that video if you have not watched it. It is the most popular regular video on my channel so far. But, you get completely dominated at home, 24-8. Shedeur Sanders missed a couple of wide open throws. Actually, the Browns had I think opening drive touchdown, or at least first quarter touchdown in this game, and that was the last thing that the Browns did offensively. Defense had an okay game, only gave up 26 points, but you're not going to win a game when you're only scoring 8. But I was at this game. Not a whole lot to really talk about in this game. Kind of a snooze fest. Grinded out defensive battle. I do remember a lot of 49ers fans actually being there, and it was kind of the opposite of what I went through the day before. My voice was completely gone. I actually tried to film a decent amount in there. It was just so windy because we were, of course, right by the lake in the end of November, the beginning of December. So it just didn't work out there. Filmed a couple of video of little snapshots of the game, and then came back and did a little post game reaction. But you could just tell that my voice was absolutely fighting for its life, and I basically did not have a voice for around a week and a half after that weekend. But yeah, not a great showing for the Browns, and this where you kind of started to see you saw the ceiling of Shedeur Sanders in that the Ravens game where he showed a lot of promise, and then the Raiders game. But again, the level of talent you were playing on that defensive side, especially without Max Crosby in Vegas. This was that was the game where we were like, oh, okay, we could have something. This was the game where we kind of all had to come back down from that. And then you go and play another really embarrassing game against the Tennessee Titans, and you let them score 31 points on you. And you score 29, which was, I believe, one of your highest scores of the season. 31. Yeah, it was like your second highest, if I'm not missing another game. You score 31 against the Dolphins, but you score 29 against the Titans, and you still lose, and it was at home. So another really embarrassing loss. Cam Ward, I believe, had a really good game. And I think the Browns were even leading at halftime, which was an interesting change of pace. But you could kind of feel that it just wasn't going to work out this year. And, of course, the Browns were still kind of in contention for that number one pick at the time, so it really wasn't a big deal that you lose this game. But it's just one of those annoying losses that you kind of it stings for a little bit, even though you're not in playoff contention at this point. Then you go on the road to Chicago and get absolutely dominated by the Bears, and you just, at this point, you are just like, I want this season to be over. You have a pretty good showing, only lose by 3 to the Bills. You beat the Steelers, which was a really, really good thing. 6 to 13, a really grinded out defensive battle. This was the game where basically it lost Mike Tomlin. If the Ravens would have won the week before or the week after, it would have lost Mike Tomlin his job. And of course, Mike Tomlin ended up getting fired, mutually departing ways, I guess you could call it. But basically fired at the end of this season. He is now, I don't believe he has a job. I think he's doing, broadcast for one of the NFL channels this year, but he will be back in coaching. Of course, the Steelers hiring Mike McCarthy for this season. And then, you come off of that, and then Myles Garrett, of course, breaks the sack record, and that was the highlight that everyone's talking about. You get the win in Cincinnati, and Schmidt hits a game winner, I believe, to make it a full circle end of the season. You end in a high note, and you draft. You don't get your number one. You don't pick one in your quarterback that you were hoping. Of course, this ended up becoming a one quarterback class at the top. In Fernando Mendoza, because Dante Moore, of course, went back to Oregon instead of declaring for the draft, where he would have been pick 2 in this NFL draft, probably going to the Jets. Instead, he comes back to Oregon, which is kind of ironic because he has a very good shot of going to the Jets this coming draft when he is completely out of eligibility. But yeah, that's just a quick little recap of last season, and then you go ahead and use that first round pick on Spencer Fano as well. A lot of people have been giving me crap about the Spencer Fano reaction that I made. I'm not going to go into that again. I've gone into it several times on my opinion on Spencer Fano. But before we get into a little bit of a roster breakdown here, in the beginning of this preseason, let's just go through. I have it pulled up on the screen here. Let's go through the schedule for this coming season. So week 1, you go to Jacksonville, and let's talk about week 1 and week 2 basically at the same time here. Week 1, you go to Jacksonville, and week 2, you go to Tampa Bay and play Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay when you play the Bucs. This is going to be rough. And I say that not because these are the two best teams you could be playing in week 1 and week 2. God knows there is much worse teams that you could be playing. It's the fact that you are going to Florida in basically the dead of summer, September 13th and September 20th. You're going to have to deal with the humidity. You're not going to be used to the humidity and the temperature in Florida. And it gets hot up here in Cleveland, but it's nowhere near what Florida is, of course. And, it's going to be tough. Jacksonville is a team that is kind of fighting for their life. That core, Trevor Lawrence is coming up on it's basically a do or die year for him. And Baker Mayfield is kind of fighting for a next. Same thing with Trevor Lawrence and Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield fighting for a say in this next era of Tampa Bay football. Mike Evans is now gone. Emeka Egbuka is sliding into that number one wide receiver position. That defense is only getting older. Jacksonville, there's definitely holes in that roster right now, but it's all about when you play these teams, and I just don't like that we're getting them in week 1 and week 2 on the road. And then you come home and play the Panthers in week 3. That'll be interesting because the Panthers obviously just made the playoffs last year. Bryce Young is coming off of one of his best season in the NFL to date, and this will be your home opener. It's going to be interesting because it's all about how this defense looks. Because if this is a grinded out defensive game, the Browns have got this in the bag. If it's a high scoring game and it's a multiple possessions and lightning strikes all over the field, then you kind of lose confidence in this game. So it's all about how this style of game goes, and you can say that about every game, but really about this game. So it's still going to be a toss up. And by no means are any of these losses guaranteed. By no means are any of these games guaranteed wins. You know what I mean? It's the NFL. The margins are so slim. It's not college football. This isn't, Ohio State's schedule where they're going to play, Kent State and all these MAC schools. And then you go and play Texas. Like, that's not a thing. All of these teams are all going to be relatively on the same level. Of course, there's obviously going to be years where teams are going to be more at the top and more at the bottom. That's what the playoffs are for, obviously. So it's always going to be close, but it's not a guaranteed win at the home opener. Then you go home, you stay home and play the Steelers on Thursday night. That'll be interesting because the Steelers have struggled in Cleveland, especially. And even if you want to go deeper, the Steelers have struggled against AFC North opponents in prime time. And this is not a Mike Tomlin team anymore. I get that. And the Browns team, I feel like everyone is kind of expecting them to be a different team from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, with the offensive line kind of still getting to gel. None of these guys on the offensive line have, played with each other at all. This is an entirely new offensive line, starter-wise. You hope everyone stays healthy, but starter-wise, is an entirely new offensive line. Same quarterback, but, none of these guys are familiar with each other on this offense, except from a few key people, Shedeur Sanders and the running backs, Jerry Jeudy. There's a few guys here, but most of this offense is going to be new, whether that is through free agency or the draft. So you come home and you go home and you play the Steelers on Thursday night. It's the Steelers. What can go wrong will go wrong, but it is at home, so that gives me a little bit more hope than it would be in Pittsburgh. Then you go on the road and play the Jets. Like we said last year, one of the more embarrassing losses on Cleveland's record last year. Yet again, Jets still don't have a quarterback. I don't know if Justin Fields is still on the Jets. I don't think he is, but the Jets are probably going to be looking for a quarterback in this upcoming draft. It is on the road. It is a 1 p.m. game, so we'll see what happens there. There's just not a lot to go off on right now because this is so early in the season. We're still in the off season. Like, there's no games that are being played. Joint practices haven't even started yet. So this is kind of hard to do, but I'm just kind of giving up a little bit of a preview. Then you go home and play the Ravens at home. And I don't really like how the beginning of the schedule works. You know, you got the Florida trip, then you got the Panthers at home, which is a playoff team. Steelers at home. You kind of wanted that game to kind of be at the end of the season to give yourself the best shot at a win. Because, you know, you're probably not going to win that game in Pittsburgh. So you kind of wanted that Browns-Steelers game in Cleveland to kind of be towards the end of the season where you're more gelled together and you have more familiarity with this offense, especially on the offense. Jets, it could be your first road win of the year. Maybe you sneak one out in Florida, but this could be your shot at your best shot at your first road win. Definitely don't have a quarterback. That defense is falling apart to say the least, but it's still, you lost to the same Jets team last year. So you just got to wonder. Ravens did sweep you last year, but Harbaugh is gone. Jesse Mentor is in. Another Michigan coach is in. And I think that it's going to be kind of the same old, same old. Lamar Jackson is getting older, so that is something to watch. Mark Ingram. Mark Andrews. I don't know why I almost said Mark Ingram, but he's the only tight end they got. They got a few more wide receivers. That defense is getting older. So, you know, some of the stuff is going to be an issue for the Ravens, but the Browns still don't have the Browns don't have Myles Garrett anymore. So you never know what that's going to look like. JOK is most likely retired. There's no Myles Garrett to get to Lamar Jackson. So you never know what these teams are going to match up like, because this is such a new Browns team and you just don't know what they look like yet. So could very well be a toss-up. Then you go and play the Titans. This is going to be Cam Ward's third year. This is on the road, and they showed some promise last year. This is probably going to be their shot to kind of make a name for themselves here against the Browns offense that could still very well be gelling together, and a defense that is probably experiencing some pains without their best player of this generation in Myles Garrett. So, and it is on the road, so you never know what's going to happen there. Then you go and play the Steelers on the road. I could very well be wrong here, but I would not be surprised if the Browns lose this game by a lot. Some of these games, they could kind of keep it close, but I will always say what can go wrong will go wrong. I will never predict the Browns to win in Pittsburgh until I see it myself. If it hasn't happened in my lifetime, I'm not going to pick it. That's just how I'm going to look at it. So if there is a guaranteed loss in this schedule, there it is right there. Then you go and play the Saints. They're kind of in a little bit of a crossroads right now. You are on the road, but they're not the best team in the world right now. Tyler Shuck came out of basically nowhere last year, and you know, Saints fans are kind of looking at him to be their next quarterback of the future, and still kind of finding their replacement for Drew Brees. But you never know what he's going to turn out. Quarterbacks love to have sophomore slumps. It happened to Baker Mayfield. It happened to Dak Prescott. You know, there's countless quarterbacks that I can name, and you never know what's going to happen with the Saints. Tyler Shuck could honestly be benched by this point in the season, and the Saints could look like a rollover team that's looking for their quarterback in the draft, in this upcoming draft. Then you go back home after this road stint, and you play the Houston Texans. They're at an even more of a crossroads than any other team that I've mentioned so far because of CJ Stroud. This defense was a Super Bowl caliber defense, a Super Bowl winning defense, and they had their weapons on offense. It was just a fact that CJ Stroud was just not good enough in the playoffs last year to get them to where they wanted to go, and they ended up falling short. They did beat, I believe it was the Steelers in the playoffs, but after that, it just fell apart, and CJ Stroud did not look like the CJ Stroud that we are expecting. That he's lived up to the expectations so far, except last year. So they are looking for a lot more from CJ Stroud. It's up to where, he fits. If he struggles again this year, the Texans are going to move on from him. If he looks like a normal CJ Stroud, he could buy himself more time. So it all depends on what CJ Stroud does. This defense is still going to be one of the top defenses in the league, most likely, unless the wheels fall off somehow. Nico Collins is still there. They have plenty of weapons. I think Joe Mixon is still on the Texans, I believe. I have not fact-checked that. But this is all going to depend on what CJ Stroud do we get. Do we get, a panicky, I like to call it Michigan CJ Stroud, or do we get Georgia CJ Stroud? Of course, I'm bringing him back to his Ohio State days, but that is where I saw him consistently every week. So that's going to be the big test for the Texans. Then you get your bye week, which kind of comes at a little bit of a weird time. Not too early, not too late though. This is not like your bye's in like week 5 or anything like that. But you come off your bye and you play the Raiders at home. This is Fernando Mendoza's rookie year, so we'll see what happens with him. Browns have kind of been up and down with rookie quarterbacks at times. I love to go back to CJ Stroud's, or not CJ Stroud. That is the year where the Browns struggled against the Texans, was the CJ Stroud rookie year. But a Justin Fields rookie year, and I love it to bring back to all these Ohio State quarterbacks. Justin Fields rookie year where Myles Garrett had like 5.5 sacks in one game a few years ago, or rest in peace Dwayne Haskins, where that defense kind of lit him up when they were still Washington was still the Washington football team. There's multiple examples of rookie quarterbacks against the Browns, obviously, and it's just a matter of what does Fernando Mendoza look like. If he is Fernando Mendoza his last year at Indiana, then the Raiders look like a team to be watched and a team to be feared. If this is more of a cautious Fernando Mendoza that's still trying to learn the ropes, then this is a more beatable team. So it all depends on that. This is a home game, so that's always going to be helpful. You're going to have the home crowd on your side. It is in late November, so the fans start, if the season starts falling apart, maybe the fans don't, sell out the building as much as they probably would have if this was a week 1 or week 2 game, but it is what it is. Raiders, this is going to be in the cold. That's also a thing. This is, Vegas, where it's not going to get as cold as it would be in Cleveland. 1 o'clock game, so no night games, unfortunately, for basically the rest of the season, except that one Thursday night game against Pittsburgh. But it's a game to watch. And then you play the Bengals for the first time this year. Bengals have consistently struggled against the Browns for multiple years, especially since Joe Burrow kind of got his rookie year started. That's another guy that we could probably talk about, Joe Burrow in his rookie season against the Browns. I think it was 2022, 2021 when Joe Burrow first got his first win, and I think it was like a Week 18 game against Cleveland's backups, basically. That was his first ever win against Cleveland. They swept the Browns, 2 years ago, and then it looked like they were going to sweep the Browns last year, but the Browns ended up taking a win in Cincinnati in the last week of the season. This is a Browns home game. Joe Burrow has kind of struggled. He's had more success at home against the Browns than he has on the road. So that is a game to watch if you're looking forward to AFC North competition. Then you go home, you stay home, and you play the Atlanta Falcons. We'll see what they look like. This is a team that I could obviously see being a playoff contender. They've always kind of been in that little area that Steelers kind of purgatory a little bit, where they're bad enough to kind of make the playoffs, but not really, but they're not good enough to make a statement in the playoffs or win a couple games in the playoffs. So it all depends on what we get. Michael Penix is back. Kyle Pitts just got signed to an extension. Drake London is still there. They've signed a couple of pieces in free agency. So it just depends on how can the Falcons put it back together, because they're still trying to get back to that Super Bowl after the 28-3 game of probably, what has it been, almost 10 years now? But they're still trying to get back to that. And it's all a matter of time of when they put it together. But it's a question of, are they going to do it this year? We'll see. And then you go on the road and you play the Giants. Jackson Dart is coming off of an up and down rookie season. So we'll see what happens with that. Yet again, another story of rookie quarterbacks against this Browns defense. Of course, you're not going to have Myles Garrett. You're not going to have Jim Schwartz. But this is still a core that, knows what it takes to be an elite defense in the NFL. So you never know. But this could very well be another sophomore slump opportunity for the Browns to take advantage of. This is in New York, and you're going back. I believe you do play in New York twice this year, which is interesting. But it's New York. You never really know. Maybe New York in football is just kind of taking a break after the next win the NBA Finals and being like, forget it. We're over it. We got our championship this year. We're good. Obviously not realistic, but still funny. Then you go back on the road to Baltimore. This is a spot where you've kind of had your ups and downs in. Of course, the comeback in 23. The last year where you got basically embarrassed. I don't know if the Browns won in Baltimore the year before. I don't think they did. But it's been a competitive rivalry. We'll see what happens with that. Like I said, Lamar Jackson is only getting older. Got a new coach in because Harbaugh is now in New York. And I even forgot to mention that Harbaugh is now in New York. So it all depends on what happens there. Harbaugh is obviously going to be familiar with the Browns. So that's going to be interesting, that Giants game, even more now. And then you come back home for your last game at home in Cleveland on January 3rd, and you play the Indianapolis Colts. Had a really, really good start to their season with Daniel Jones. Unfortunately, he gets hurt, and the wheels kind of fall off. So they've shown a lot of promise, and this could be a team that is basically kind of coasting into the playoffs, but this also could be a team that's fighting for a playoff spot. You know, it all depends, again, on what the Texans do, because they are in the same conference, or the same division, excuse me. It just depends. If the Texans are struggling again and Indianapolis is, you know, back to what we expect them to be and what they've set the bar as, this could be a game where they're just already ready to basically put the backups in and get ready for the playoffs. So you never know. And then you go on the road and you play Cincinnati. Same thing. Joe Burrow has struggled against the Browns in his career, but the more recent success that he's had has come in Cincinnati. I know they lost in Cincinnati last year and actually won in Cleveland last year as well in week 1. But why I feel like it's always Cleveland and Cincinnati on the last week of the regular season, which is interesting. But, you know, it is what it is. Yeah, I'm not going to restate what I just said for a few minutes ago. But that is going to be your early schedule preview for the Browns. Let's get into the Browns offense. All right, so on the screen right now is going to be my, I don't want to say predictions, but my projections, I guess you could say, for week 1. This is what I think is going to be the most accurate for, you know, the offense for the Browns for week 1. Of course, this is non-injury related. We'll see what happens with this. But let's just start off with Shedeur Sanders and this quarterback battle that we've got going on. You can obviously switch a couple of these, but I think Shedeur Sanders, because he is younger, because he costs less, and because he's probably got more of an upside, honestly. I'm not a Shedeur Sanders, you know, guy. I don't think Shedeur Sanders is going to lead us to a Super Bowl or anything like that, but I also don't think Deshaun Watson will either. I just think because Shedeur Sanders is younger, he's going to be probably more teachable. It's just an instinct I have. I think, you know, if you have two guys that are like this and, you know, they're both going tit for tat, I feel like you go with the younger one because the older one's not going to be here for as long. Maybe that's just my opinion and being, you know, younger. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. But I do have Shedeur Sanders as the starting quarterback right here. Quinshon Judkins is going to be our RB1. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Casey Concepcion, Denzel Boston, and Jerry Jeudy. You can interchange where you want them, but I think those are your 3 receivers. You're also going to have Cedric Tillman as a wide receiver 4 as well. You know, Jamari Thrash could also be a guy that you're looking at. Maybe if he makes it through preseason, he could be a guy that you could be looking at this wide receiver position. Harold Fainen is also going to be your tight end 1. You do get the kid out of Cincinnati who you know, has good upside and is going to be your tight end 2. Of course, David Njoku is out. and did not get re-signed, and I think it was time to move on from David Njoku anyways. But Harold Fane is going to be taking over that tight end one role, and he kind of already did before he got injured. But I think this just puts more of an official stamp on it. Then you get to the offensive line, which is going to be the most interesting part of this Browns team, apart from maybe defensive end, for obvious reasons. At the tackle spots, I'm going to have, this is week 1, this is not going to be like my full season stuff, obviously. Is going to be Spencer Fano and Titus Howard. Howard is coming off, I believe the Browns did trade for him. Let me grab the specifics for that. For a 5th round pick, yes. So the Browns did trade for him from Houston for a 6th round pick in 2026. And, you know, the Browns did sign him to a 3-year, $63 million extension. And, you know, he's going to be your tackle of, I don't want to say the future, but he's going to be a guy that you're going to want to keep over there and kind of be the guy that everyone looks to as a veteran guy. Same with Elton Jenkins, going to be a veteran guy you kind of get off of, I believe, free agency as well. And, you know, the right side should be your strong side of this offensive line. The issue is guys like, I also have Parker Brailsford here, the center out of, I believe, Alabama. Just because he's younger, same thing with Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson. Interchanged him and Luke Whippler I have on the bottom of the screen here. But you can interchange them both. I just have Parker Brailsford there. I think he's got more of an upside than Luke Whippler does. Ohio State guy, I'm not showing my bias in any way like this, but he is going to be a guy that I think Parker Brailsford is going to be the guy that you're going to want at center. For best case scenario, I should say. I feel like that's the best way of putting this. This is best case scenario Browns offensive lineup, I feel like. Zion Johnson, a new guard, going to be in there. Not a whole lot to really talk about with him. He's just a guy that is going to be kind of a placeholder there for the Browns. And then the big question mark here is going to be Spencer Fano. Where does he fit on this offensive line? Of course, the Browns did say that they are going to put him at tackle for this upcoming season. He's going to have his struggles. It's offensive tackle in the NFL. This is a big jump. The best guy that Spencer Fano did play last year at Utah, best edge, I should say, was David Bailey. I feel like we can probably pick close to 10 guys in the NFL right now that we would probably have over David Bailey. So the talent gap between, you know, the college and NFL, especially at the edge position, is going to be a huge step forward. You know, if you look at guys, of course, Aiden Hutchinson is kind of a little bit of an outlier. What non-Michigan fan can name the guy next to Aiden Hutchinson there? I think it was David Ajabo, actually. Then you got Jack Sawyer and JTT and other Ohio State guys, you know, the Tennessee defensive lineman that I cannot name right now. Crap, that name escapes me. But there's just not there's not like the Bosa brothers or Chase Young or anything coming out of college football right now, and that's kind of a reason why I'm a little bit skeptical on Spencer Fano playing tackle in the NFL week 1. So we'll see. I think best case scenario is obviously Fano playing tackle. He's obviously going to go through some growing pains. I think he's going to be really good in the run blocking department, which is kind of what the Browns want to do. They want to be a run-first team. They're not going to want to put the ball in either Shedeur Sanders or Deshaun Watson's hands all the time. These are young wide receivers. They're going to be making mistakes. Jerry Jeudy is a guy that should not probably be your wide receiver 1. I think you kind of still have him in there for this year. Maybe Denzel Boston or Casey Concepcion can kind of take over for Jerry Jeudy in maybe the end of this season to the beginning of next season. But for right now, the veteran is going to be Jerry Jeudy in the offense, in the wide receiver 1 position. I'm kind of bouncing all the way back and forth here, but Spencer Fano is going to be your best case scenario to play at tackle right now. If he does not play tackle and you have to switch him into guard, that's going to be a whole nother thing. You're going to have to bring in DeJuan Jones, who has shown that he is not very reliable when it comes to being healthy. The best ability is availability. And he just has shown over and over again that he cannot be available when the Browns need him to start. As a swing tackle and stuff like that, I think he's great. This is a great guy to have on your offensive line bench a little bit there. That's why I have him down there in key subs. But he's going to be a guy that you're not going to want to really trust to start full time. So that's why I have Spencer Fano there as the tackle. Then you have, I'm going to just go down the subs as well. Dylan Sampson, switch in Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson. Those guys are going to be a team. They're not going to be, this isn't like, 10, 15 years ago where you're only going to have one running back. You're going to want to have a running back come out by committee. One of the best running back duos right now, especially at their age in the NFL right now. It's just a matter of, can this offensive line block for those running backs? DeJuan Jones, I just talked about. Luke Whippler, you can, replace him with Parker Brailsford on the starting lineup. Really doesn't matter to me. I think Parker Brailsford has more of an upside, so I put him there. And then Deshaun Watson. I think you're probably going to end up seeing both of these guys, Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson, at some points of this season. I obviously don't know when, but both of these guys are not going to be your home run hitters, most likely. Could one of these guys be your home run hitters? Sure. Not likely, but sure. And that's just going to be something that we're going to have to prepare for. We're going to probably see both of these guys unless one of these guys runs away with it in the beginning of when football starts getting played seriously. These guys aren't going to blow your mind. They might blow your minds in practice, but it's all going to matter of when you get on the field and the other team's going to want to take your head off. What do you do? Shedeur Sanders has the most recent experience, but Deshaun Watson has the more, broader experience between college and the NFL. Deshaun Watson is a national champion. Shedeur Sanders did not even win a bowl game in college. Deshaun Watson has been a successful quarterback in the NFL for multiple years. Shedeur Sanders hasn't got that yet. He's only got 1 year under his belt so far. So, experience goes to Deshaun Watson right now. Youth goes to Shedeur Sanders. So it all depends on what the Browns kind of hold dear. It all depends on, obviously, what's going to happen in these, practices between mini camps and joint practices and preseason games especially. But that's just going to be my little bit of a roster breakdown for this offense. This is best case scenario for this offense. There are a little bit of holes here of obviously some talent gap between this offense and the better than average offenses in the NFL. Do I think that this offense is going to improve from last season? Of course, this offense has nowhere to go but up this year. I believe they were dead last by a pretty significant margin in expected points. They should be, up in the mid-range this coming year. I expect them to be. Obviously, we haven't gotten that for the past 2 seasons, so we're all just kind of hoping and praying here. But right now, I feel somewhat okay with this offense right now, especially how young this offense is. So let's go to defense. All right, last little part, and then we'll get out of here. Let's look at the defensive side of the ball right now. So just for this little exercise here, I have 4 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, 2 safeties, and then 3 corners. I know it looks like I only have 2 corners out there. I have 3 and just 2 linebackers. And then I have Justin Jefferson, the linebacker, over here in key subs as well. So let's just go from top, or bottom to top, at least. So Jared Verse, Malik Collins, Mason Graham, Alex Wright. Yet again, this is probably going to be best case scenario here for Cleveland. Keep that in mind. Jared Verse, the Browns have come out and said that he is going to be, they want him to play edge, basically. That is what they want him to play. And we just got to wait and see, because right now we're all probably, most Browns fans are probably still mad about this Myles Garrett trade. Unfortunately, I just didn't see it coming when it happened, but probably should have in hindsight. But it is what it is. Jared Verse is now officially a Cleveland Brown. We got to accept it, and it just is what it is at this point. Now, is it going to be a factor when it comes into these games? For sure. Are there going to be offenses that are going to test this Browns defense in a way that they had no business testing this Browns defense with Myles Garrett in the field? For sure. This secondary is going to be tested like it's never been tested before. And that's what has me really, really worried about this defense. Jim Schwartz is gone, and honestly, I feel like that's kind of for the best, especially with Myles Garrett gone. Could you imagine, honestly, if Jim Schwartz was the head coach and we still traded Myles Garrett away? Like, why do we even make the Jim Schwartz hire then at that point? But anyways, Jared Verse, Malik Collins, Mason Graham, Alex Wright. You can also put Mike Hall in there with and Malik Collins. You can also switch them in and out. Kind of the same thing with the center and quarterback of the offense. But that's just going to be my thing. I have Mike Hall as a sub and Malik Collins as the starter. You just don't take it too personally. Mason Graham, obviously one of the best rookies of last season. I believe he actually had a rib injury last year, and he was looking really, really good, and then Myles Garrett kind of took over the defensive line while chasing the sack record last year. And a lot of that attention went away from Mason Graham, and I feel like a lot of the offenses to prepare for the Browns are going to try and put more attention on Mason Graham because Myles Garrett is not there anymore. So it's all going to depend on what happens with that. Defensive tackles have notoriously been, a little bit shell-shocked to their rookie year. That really didn't happen with Mason Graham. It's all going to depend on what he does to prepare for his second year, obviously with his second full offseason on the team to get ready, maybe add a little bit more muscle, a little bit more weight. And it's only up for him. And I'm really glad that the Browns actually took him instead of a guy like, Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter kind of disappointed relative to where he was drafted last year. And Travis Hunter is obviously got injured midpoint of the year. So we'll see what happens with him this coming year and if he plays both sides again. But what the Browns got in return in that trade for Jacksonville, I am really, really happy with. Got Quinshon Judkins, got Mason Graham, and you had another guy in the last draft class. I can't remember which pick that was off the top of my head. But I feel like in hindsight, that was a big, big trade for the Browns that gave them a lot more movement and a lot more success on this defensive front, especially after trading Myles Garrett. So you get Mason Graham. Alex Wright, who was your number 2 guy, is going to probably take a lot more of the burden. This is going to be more of a defensive line by committee type stuff. This is not going to be a Myles Garrett and the defensive line. This is going to be the Browns defensive line. Jared Verse is a good player. He's just not going to be Myles Garrett, and that's okay. So we'll see what happens with that. Then let's go up to corners. The 3 corners that I have here is Tyson Campbell, Myles Harden, and Denzel Ward. Notice anything a little weird about that? You have Denzel Ward, one of the best corners in the league. Then you have Tyson Campbell, who's up and down, and Myles Harden. If you have not watched the video that I made with Will, I told him to name me another Browns corner besides Denzel Ward, and he said Martin Emerson. Martin Emerson is not on the team anymore. And I'm not poking fun at Will because he does not know the Browns. Ha 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 ha. No, that's not what I was doing. I'm literally asking someone who's not a Browns fan, name another corner on this team besides Denzel Ward, and he couldn't do it. And, that's an issue. I feel like the Browns kind of need another corner in this room because this corner room and these safeties and this secondary and these linebackers are going to get tested like they've never been tested in this defense. And that just has me worried. If Denzel Ward goes down, who's your other guy here? That's just going to be an issue. Who's going to be your next guy that's going to kind of take over Denzel Ward's role? You had Greg Newsome and you had Martin Emerson and you had guys that could, plug and play. Right now, if Denzel Ward gets a concussion and he's out for a couple of weeks, which hopefully that does not happen this year, he stayed relatively healthy last year, that's going to be an issue for the secondary that does not have Myles Garrett to kind of rely upon anymore. So no shot at Will whatsoever, but it's just going to be it's going to be a question mark that we're going to have to answer for. Then you got the linebackers. I know I have Justin Jefferson here in subs, but imagine we have 3 linebackers on the field here. Quincy Williams, Carson Schlesinger, and Justin Jefferson. Also, Isaiah McGuire, move him down to the defensive line here with Alex Wright. They kind of switch back and forth there, and I feel like those edges are going to be more of a committee-based defense of line now. So Justin Jefferson, Carson Schlesinger, and then Quincy Williams. Quincy Williams is a new acquisition for the Browns. Carson Schlesinger, of course, the defensive rookie of the year. And then Justin Jefferson, a rookie out of Alabama. So we'll see what happens with Justin Jefferson. I like, from what I've seen of him, I like him okay for right now. He wasn't a guy that I looked like a Carson Schlesinger where it was like, oh man, we got ourselves a guy. You knew with Carson Schlesinger immediately after seeing the draft tape and all that stuff. Doesn't jump off of the screen like Carson Schlesinger does, but I don't think the Browns really need another Carson Schlesinger. It's going to be interesting because some of this stuff that Carson Schlesinger did last year were kind of a little bit out of character for rookie linebackers, so it's going to be interesting to see what adjustments, same with Mason Graham, it's going to be interesting to see what adjustments offenses make for Carson Schlesinger. And of course, teams are gonna make he's made teams have his attention now. So it's going to be like do I have your attention now type stuff. It's going to be interesting to see what he does with that. Quincy Williams, he's a good linebacker. Like he's a quality starting linebacker, not going to be a franchise style linebacker. He's not going to be Bobby Wagner or anything like that. But it's a good quality starter linebacker. And it's kind of what the Browns needed after, unfortunately, JOK is most likely going to be retired for the rest of his career, and it really sucks for what ended up happening with his career. And then you have the safety room. So you have Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. I put him in over Ronnie Hickman. You can interchange them. I think most likely, best case scenario, yet again, this is best case scenario, you have the younger guy go in, and I love Emmanuel McNeil-Warren out of Toledo. It's a hometown guy for me. Grant Delpit is still one of the best safeties in the NFL, serviceable safeties. I wouldn't say best safeties in the NFL, but he's a serviceable safety. He's a star safety, same tier as Quincy Williams, and he's just not fit for a free safety. Grant Delpit is, but I think Emmanuel McNeil-Warren is more fit for that free safety role. And I think honestly, if you wanted to switch, let's say Grant Delpit, unfortunately gets hurt or has to sit out a game or something happens to Grant Delpit, you can put Emmanuel McNeil-Warren down at free safety, put Ronnie Hickman put Emmanuel McNeil-Warren down at strong safety, put Ronnie Hickman up at free safety, and you'll still be good to go. So interchangeable safeties there. I think Grant Delpit right now is going to be your only guy that you can't really mix and match. I think, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren is going to be more of your hybrid guy, and Ronnie Hickman is going to be more your free safety guy only, and Grant Delpit's going to be your strong safety guy only. You can't really flip-flop those guys, but Emmanuel McNeil-Warren can more plug and play for both of those positions from what I've seen. Obviously, you got to look at the tape once that starts getting going. But I do like, this is best case scenario, I do want to see Emmanuel McNeil-Warren kind of take over that free safety spot. And then yet again, I'll just go back over these key subs here. Mike Hall, you can change with Malik Collins. He struggled with injury all year last year, especially in the beginning of the year. It was like a thing where, they didn't put him on the PUP lists because they thought that he was going to come back within week 2. Ended up not coming back till week 6 or something crazy. So yet again, him and DeJuan Jones, Ohio State guys, that I think you got in the same draft too, just not being as available as you want them to be. So I have Malik Collins in there just because he has been more available than Mike Hall so far in Mike Hall's career. Ronnie Hickman, kind of just explained that. You can change him with Emmanuel McNeil-Warren all you want. That's okay with me. Isaiah McGuire, kind of, if you want to put him next to Alex Wright and kind of have a 1A, 1B there, I'm okay with that. And then Justin Jefferson, just because it didn't look right with him, also with Miles Harden there. I just wanted him to kind of, let him be, different, obviously different bases and stuff like that. I wanted to get the two safeties up there. and the 4 defensive linemen. So Justin Jefferson, put him on in the starting lineup as well. But what you notice is there's not a whole lot of depth in the corner position. Obviously, I just talked about that. I really think it would benefit the Browns to go get another corner, whether that is through free agency or that's through a trade. The issue is there's not a whole lot of depth here. Maybe you can trade away a guy like Ronnie Hickman, but you're really asking a lot from Emmanuel McNeill-Warren if you do that. So there's not a whole lot of, stuff that you can kind of work with here. Maybe you can go trade away a Mike Hall or a Malik Collins and go get yourself another corner, but yet again, you're putting a lot of pressure on both of whoever is staying in Cleveland. So I would probably want to lean towards a little bit more free agency if someone doesn't, jump off of the page when it comes to, undrafted free agents, of course. There's obviously going to be a couple of guys that are going to surprise some people, and maybe some corner surprises us in the preseason, and we don't have to worry about it anymore. That also could very well happen. That's probably best case scenario for the Browns, and obviously I'm doing a best case scenario lineup here for you guys, but that is my stuff here. We looked at the schedule, the early preview for that. We looked at both best case scenarios lineups for the Browns offense and the Browns defense. Stay tuned. I will be doing kind of a little bit more of a lecture and a preseason a schedule prediction for both the Browns and as well as Ohio State. If you guys do want me to do another type of video like this for Ohio State, please let me know. There will be more videos coming next week. I am going on vacation next week, so we'll see when I get that up. But until then, I'll see you when I see you.